Well, I want to welcome everybody, and I am so thrilled that you're here today. I'm Cindy Kabika with Energized Living Today, and we have Marilyn Devonish. We are going to have the opportunity to experience today Hawaiian Huna. Do I have that pronounced right? Is it Huna?
Absolutely perfectly, yes.
Wonderful. And this is an ancient healing technique, and it clears stress and anxiety and overwhelm. And I've got to tell you, as I've gotten to know you, Marilyn, you are amazing. You are so amazing. You've gone through so much in your life, and you took that as an opportunity to learn all of these healing modalities to help yourself, and then along with some other modalities, and you've taken that expertise out into the world and helping so many people. I would like to start off the conversation with you on your health journey when you were told that you had Alzheimer's, and then 10 years later, you ended up feeling like you needed to not be here anymore. So I'd like to just start by you sharing that story, if you would.
Yeah, it's been, to say it's been an interesting journey is almost an understatement, but you're absolutely correct. When I was in my 20s, I was diagnosed with what was thought to be early onset Alzheimer's. And I realized something, because I was ill at the time, I had all sorts of things going on. There was a medical intervention that went wrong. And so I went from being very fit, very healthy, to being obese, very heavily overweight. I went bald and I lost all of my hair, and I mean comb over bald. You could, see my scalp. I used to have beautiful clear skin, so my skin went crazy. And one of the things that I noticed was my memory started to go as well, where you could say something to me, I would hear what you said, and then 5 minutes later, if you came back and said, what were we talking about? I would have no idea. And I was studying to be a chartered accountant at the time, and I realized that I would be studying, and I could read a book 10, 15 times and spend hours and days studying something, come back to it a week later, no idea what I'd read. And it's as though I'd never seen it before. And I kind of let this go on for about a year, and I was like, this is crazy. And it was just a really silly thing. My then partner, we were at home, and I was reading like the TV guide, and I'm really reading it. I closed the magazine, I walk into the kitchen, and he very innocently said, "What's on tonight?" And I said, I don't know. And then I said, EastEnders? And he said, but that's always on like a Tuesday night. What else is on? And I said, I've got no idea. And I just burst into tears. And at that point, I thought, this is beyond being a little bit forgetful. So I went to see my doctor. He said, everything you're describing, it presents itself like Alzheimer's. And he said, there's nothing I can do for you. The only thing I can do, I can give you a medical certificate that you can give to it's called the ACCA, that I can give to the accountancy body. And I can see if they can let me have extra time in my exams. Because I went from being very academic when I did my business degree. I was something like 1.7% away from getting a first-class degree. And I was also working full time. And now I'm sitting in these exams and I'm getting 23%. I'm staring at the paper, and I'm like, I've got no idea what's going on here. And that was the state of being for about 3 years. And then I just came across something which at least piqued my curiosity and made me go, maybe there's a glimmer of hope. And that thing was called photo reading. It's like an accelerated learning technique. So I kind of thought, okay, maybe I can start doing bits for myself. But then a few years later, I ended up on a personal development training. But it also coincided with me deciding at age 32, I was going to commit suicide, because the partner I then had an affair. With the illness, the affair, realizing that maybe I didn't want to be a chartered accountant, but I didn't know what to do with my life. It just got too much. And it genuinely felt like the easiest decision was just to not be here. And so I actually sat and I researched all of the ways that I might be able to do it. I'm squeamish. So there are some options, I just had to rule those out straight away. But I just sat and I actually went through my list and I could do that. No, that wouldn't work. I could do that. No good at tying knots, so that's not going to work. And I just went through a whole list of things I could do. And because I was very quiet and shy, I realized that if I was going to be an accountant, I would need to learn to speak to people. So I accidentally signed up on a personal development training, thinking I'd signed up for a communication skills course. And then that was when I realized that I'd signed up for the course that included the Huna. And I did try to get a refund because I'm like, this isn't what I signed up for. I've got a business degree and I'm going to be a chartered accountant. I'm not interested in NLP, hypno. No, it's just not me. And they wouldn't give me a refund, but they said, come to the training. If you don't get massive value at the end of the training, we will give you a refund. So now I'm angry as well because it was several £1,000s and now a week of my time. So I just went along to prove that it didn't work. So I could just go get my money back, carry on with my somewhat miserable life, and that would be the end of it. But by the end of that training, I went from to wow, this is amazing. And then that was the first inkling of the mind-body connection and that there's more to this world than meets the eye. And it was almost like an overnight, and the reason I call what I do is under the banner of transformations. It was an overnight transformation. I went in one end, came out the other end completely different. And when I say completely different, it felt as though finally at the age of 32, I was the person that I felt I was kind of destined to be, that there was something going on that I just couldn't access. And I didn't even dare to believe it was there. And suddenly it started to be revealed to me, because it's been a journey. I'm now 51. So it's been a progression of the expansion and realizing there's so much more, but that's really how it all started.
What a story. What a journey you've been on. And so when you were thinking, I don't want to be here anymore, was it the Huna that really took you to the other side of that? Or did you decide beforehand that that's not what you were going to do and then go back to school?
I decided I would take, because I decided I was going to commit suicide in September 2000. The course that I did was in October 2000. So just a few weeks apart. So I thought, still here, I'll just go to the course, get my money back, evaluate my life and just go from there. So that was my master plan, just to, just see if there's any way they could help me. And one of the reason Huna piqued my curiosity was it was my first, even though it's really strange, on some level, something. I know that energy and thought kind of travels, because I was the sort of person, I was always angry, never smiling. And I knew I could give someone a look across the room and they would feel it. So I kind of knew that in a not so good way. But the Huna, it was the first time I was in the class. And at this point, when he asked for a volunteer, he said, does anyone have a person that you have a difficult relationship with and you'd like to change it? So I put my hand up straight away, because I was still in the mode. I was volunteering for everything because I needed to collect my evidence to go, well, I tried that and that didn't work. And then I did that and that didn't work. And then you told me to, and that. So I'm just collecting evidence. So I volunteer. And so he's teaching the class and he says, well, think of that person. I says, okay. So I'm thinking of the person. And then he carries on teaching the class. And then about 15 minutes later, he says, how are you doing? I'm like, well, you haven't done anything. Carries on teaching. 15 minutes later, how are you doing? I was like, you still haven't done anything. And this went on for nearly an hour. At the end of the time, he then says, how are you doing? And I was just about to go, no, 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 no. And then I just thought, you know what? I'm thinking of the person now and I feel calmer about them. But I think it's because he's desensitized me. He's made me think about them so much that now I'm just a little bit more whatever. I'm just tired. One of the issues I had with this person is they would never call me. But if people said, how's Marilyn? They would go, well, I don't know. She never calls. It was that kind of dynamic.
Yeah.
So I got home that evening and there was a message on my phone from them saying, hi, how are you? And I was like, well, something must be wrong because they never called. So I rang them up and he said, how are you? You okay? Yeah. How are you? I said, I'm fine. And she said, what have you been doing? And this is a point. I was like, oh, here we go. Because she's a lawyer. Now, I was of all of us, I was the one who had never really focused on what I was going to do. So I did a bit of here, then I left this job, then I did this, and now I'm giving up my job in the city to be an accountant. So I was thinking, if I told her that I'm on a hypnosis course, I'm going to get a lecture. But I thought, I don't want to lie. So all I said is, I've been on a course. it should be obvious that it's an accountancy course. She said, what course? I was like, oh, here we go. So I took a deep breath and I thought I'm going to go for the most out there thing I could say. I said, hypnotherapy. And then I waited. And at the time, she was pregnant with the twins. Her first response was, oh, do you think hypnotherapy will help me with my morning sickness? And at that point, I held the receiver away from my face and I was like, she's been abducted by aliens, because this is not the woman I know. And so we had this great conversation. I put down the phone. I was like, what happened there? And since that time in October 2000, she's been completely supportive of my work, tells people what I do. And when I finished the course, I went round, because she knew what she was having. She never told any of us what she was having. And I said, oh, I've learned this thing with a pendulum. So I remember she's lying on the bed. I'm standing over her with a crystal pendulum hanging from my fingers and going, is it a girl and a boy? Is it a boy and a girl? Is it two girls? Is it boys? And the pendulum kept saying no. Anytime I put a girl into the equation, it was an immediate no. Whenever I said boys, it said yes. And she had two boys. But
Wow.
but I was just like, I can't explain what happened, because he didn't know who she was. He didn't know who I was thinking of. Yet in whatever he did, and now I know he did the silent version of Huna. We're going to do the bells and whistles version today. You'll see what I mean later. But he didn't do anything. And I was like, he didn't do anything, but that person changed. And then a few years later, I had a similar, a friend of mine phoned me up. She was suicidal. She phoned one evening. She said, I'm just phoning to say thank you for being my friend. I wanted to say goodbye. I'm going to kill myself. So I said, okay, can you hold off doing it tonight and maybe put it off till tomorrow? And if you're okay with that, I will send you some Huna. So she's drunk, but says yes. So I'm working away, writing a proposal. Went up to bed about 1 o'clock in the morning, fell asleep, woke up at 3 a.m. Went, oh, I didn't send the Huna. So I'm sat in bed, I'm thinking of her, and I'm like, I went back to sleep. The next morning I came down, there's an email from her around 8 a.m. She says, Marilyn, I'm so sorry. I'm really embarrassed. She said, I've had a really bad breakup. I've not been eating. I've not been sleeping. I've not slept for the last 2 or 3 months. I'm so sorry. And then she said, but this is the point where you tell me I'm crazy. And as I read what she'd written, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. She said, around 3 o'clock this morning, I felt really peaceful, really calm, and I had the best night's sleep I've had in months. Did you do something? And that's the point where I says, oh my goodness, you're not going to believe this. And then I relayed what happened about me falling asleep and waking up at 3 a.m. and doing the Huna. And I was like, oh my goodness, I already intellectually knew this was possible, but I've actually seen it. And that's happened so many times over the years. Andrew Mondier has been on many of my calls when I've done these weird and wonderful things. And Andrew is the reason that I'm here speaking to you tonight. And thank you, Andrew, for putting me in touch with Cindy. But
Yes.
that really then started a whole different trajectory, where I then started working with people first on teleseminars where we dial in, and then on, online events. And what I realized was I could do a Huna session. People could listen to that recording years after I'd made it. They would have exactly the same experience as people who were on it live. And so it just opened up a world of possibilities for me. And it's just been one of the most, I do about 20 different modalities: NLP, hypnosis, timeline therapy, Huna, soul plan reading, past life regression, future life progression, all sorts of things are in the mix. And it's a bit like, I don't have children, but I'm guessing when you're a parent, you should not have a favorite child. Well, if you do, you shouldn't tell them that, but it's one of my favorites. It's one of my favorite modalities, and it's always a favorite of my clients.
Well, there's several of them. I was reading your list and thinking, oh my gosh, I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to do this. And, I also do archetypal profiling and soul plan. I love that, core issue therapy, and would love you to come back at some point and talk about some of the others, because you do so many things. But today, Huna, we're going to be experiencing, you're going to tell us about it a little more, and then we're going to be experiencing a meditation. Yes?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, why don't you go ahead and, well, before we get started on that, I just want to open it up to everybody and see if anyone has any questions. We've got a wonderful group of folks. Hey, everybody. It's so good to see you. Do you have any questions, anyone? Taryn, do you have a question?
Oh, Taryn, your mic is muted. You need
There
to.
we go.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just was waving because she waved at us, so I was waving back at her.
Okay.
But that does sound like, well, I was thinking, I've been having a whole lot of trouble sleeping for months now. So like last night I lay awake, I think I lay awake all night and fell asleep about 6 o'clock in the morning, you know? So,
Will this help with that?
what?
I was just asking Marilyn if this will help with sleeping, because a lot of people, like Taryn said, you know, he was having a problem sleeping, and I've heard that from a lot of people these days.
I wonder if there's, one time I asked a psychic, you know, I've been having trouble, a lot of trouble sleeping, and then it occurred to me, I heard some other people say that they had trouble sleeping the night before, and she said the Earth is passing through some very strong energies, and a lot of people are having trouble sleeping, and she said you could put it different ways, but say one way would be to say, according to their astrological makeup, it affects some people, you know, more than others. And, you know, anyway,
Will this,
so
Marilyn, will this help with this?
What?
I was just asking Marilyn if this would help with the sleep.
Some of my clients find that we'll do the process, and some of the funniest ones, like we've been on the line, like with the Tele7, like plays music when you start and it plays music at the end. Some of my clients are famous for suddenly coming to, and we've all gone because they've just gone. And or they'll kind of go, I have no idea what happened, or they're buzzing, but then when they're sleeping, it's really lovely and it's really deep. So people do find it very relaxing, and because it's about breaking up and shifting the old energies, it's wonderful for that as well. So yes, people do find that it will definitely often impact their sleep and their energy levels and their levels of clarity as well, in terms of how they're feeling. And if people are feeling a bit overwhelmed, stuck, etc., then they often find that they'll notice the energy is moving more freely, and they feel more relaxed and more energized and more realigned and more connected. So yes, for sure.
Okay, great. Great, Taryn. So as we experience this, we'll see if this helps for you. And do we have anybody else?
Penny asks, can Huna help with finances? It may be past life block to sustained abundance.
Andrew is very precise. You know, I've had some really interesting, and I don't know what it is about the 9 months either, but I've had some clients who have come specifically because of money, because of finances. And there was one of my clients, lovely guy called Lack, and I say his name because he talks about it publicly as well. And I worked with a friend on some Huna with a friend, and he said, you should speak to Marilyn. So we did a session over the phone. And so we do the Huna to unblock whatever's stuck with finances, because he had been out of work for 9 months and said, you know, I've got to the end of my savings. I'm not sure what else to do. So we do the Huna. A couple of days later, he gets in touch, he phones, and he does the thing that clients always do. They start with, oh my gosh, you are not going to believe this. And I said, go ahead, surprise me. And he said, a contract that was completely just gone, finished. He said, they've gotten in touch and they want me to start tomorrow, just out of the blue. And so he's been busy ever since. And I had another of my clients, again, strangely, with the 9 months. She'd been out of work for 9 months, did some Huna with her. I think we probably did a Skype session. And I got a message a few days later saying, Marilyn, I've got a problem. So I said, what's happened? She said, I've just been offered 2 jobs. I don't know which one to choose. And so people find that for some reason, whatever is going on, it's kind of unblocking things that have been stuck. And the way I kind of see it, and there's a process within Huna called Ho'oponopono, and there's what I call the social media version. I'm sorry, I love you, please forgive me, thank you. That's not the version I learned when I was out in Hawaii studying Huna, but there's a bigger Ho'oponopono process, which is a full-on process. And it's about cutting old links and ties and connections and then remaking them, because the kahunas believe that we have an energetic connection to everything and everyone that we come into contact with. And when those connections get clogged up and just overrun, we no longer have that sense of energetic flow. And so one of the things about Huna is clearing those old blockages so that you get more flow, you get more movement, and people will then often find that with regards to money, finances, relationships, work, jobs, all sorts of things can start to unfold. And definitely for health, I've used it a lot. Like yourself, we were talking earlier before this officially started with some of the injury things. A few years ago, I went on a cruise. I went on a Caribbean cruise for 2 weeks. And on, I think it was the second or third day, I was coming down the stairs on the deck and it was slippery. And I went over on the side of my ankle. Couldn't walk. I crawled back to my cabin. And I'm like, okay, I've finally taken this holiday. And I'm going dancing tonight. I'm going walking tomorrow. And I've got basically 2 weeks left. And I'm going to be hobbling around. And I limped down. The ship's doctor wasn't on duty yet. And I thought, well, in the meantime, what can I do? So, by this time, I'm on my hands and knees to get back to my cabin. I couldn't put any pressure on it. Turns out I torn the ligament. And I just thought, I've got nothing here. I've got a pair of stockings and me. So I just sit and I did an hour and a half of Huna, which is a really long time because I normally do a few minutes. So I did an hour and a half of Huna. I then used the stocking to wrap my ankle. And then I did some Huna while I was sitting having dinner. I was in the bar. People said, hey, Marilyn, you're not dancing tonight. I said, oh, not quite yet. Give me a few hours. I hurt my ankle today. And I couldn't even touch the top of my thigh because the ankle was so painful. So while people are doing the pub quiz, I'm sat and I'm doing the Huna. By 11 p.m. that night, and I'd sprained it around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. By 11 p.m. I was able to dance. I did some Huna that evening. By the next day, I was able to go on the walking tour of the Virgin Islands, wherever we were. And I was absolutely fine for the 2 weeks. What I'd said to myself was, if I need any further assistance with this, please remind me when I get home. So my friend picks me up from the airport. She drops me home. I say goodbye to her, close the door, turned around to walk to my sofa, and my ankle just had searing pain just for a second. I was like, what's going on here? And then I remembered what I said. If I need some further assistance, remind me. So I call my osteopath. I say to him, hey, Steve, I get there. And he said, oh, I love ankles. That was my specialism at university. He looked at my ankle and he said, what did you do? And I explained. He says, no. What did you do in terms of treatment? And I said, and I didn't answer. I said, why? He said, it looks as though you've already had 2 or 3 treatments. I just need to do a tiny little bit of realigning. But he said, it's all done. Who did you? And I said, and then I explained. I thought, I'm not sure how he's going to take this explanation. And he was very quiet. And then he said, sometimes things happen to remind us how powerful we are. And I did not expect my osteopath to say that, but it was as though I had basically done 2 or 3 osteopathic treatments. All I'd done was the Huna that we're going to do here today. So it has been it just blows my mind. And I went out to Huna to Hawaii the first time in 2005, and to this day, as we sit here in 2020, new things happen every day that make me go, wow, that's amazing. So it has so many uses.
That is so awesome. Well, we've got somebody else that has their hand up over here. It's Anne. Hi, Anne. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes. Are you going to do a treatment for us tonight?
Yep.
Okay, because I'm very excited about this. Yeah, I just did something this morning that was very unusual. I've been resisting doing these breathing exercises, and I did it this morning and I felt so good. And then all this resistance kind of came up, and I made peace between the resistance and the joy parts of me. And instead of the resistance coming in and wiping out the joy like it likes to do, they ended up skipping down the road together. So I'm in a very unusual place today, and this is perfect.
And I'm going to, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. I might have to stand up so I can get closer to the camera. Can you see my necklace?
Oh, I love
can.
that.
Right. You just said, you just described this symbol. You said, well, I've got the joy and the da 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 da. The symbol represents the dichotomy. Can you hold two opposing forces? Happiness, sadness, fear, freedom, whatever it might be, poverty, wealth. One of the principles of Huna, this is the whole Huna this is Huna, it personified in a symbol, and that triangle represents, if you can hold those two opposing forces, the way I describe it, it's like a quantum collapse. So they collapse into each other, they go up into the circle, and there's a circle within a circle, and it's called the EO. The EO is a space between the space where when you get the energy, it just transmutes the energy, and you do have that sense where it's balanced, it's clear, and you're not being pulled in any direction. And for me, that is almost moving then into the definition of peace and alignment and relaxation. So you've described perfectly with the joy and the two sides. That's exactly the premise of what Huna in its essence is about.
Yeah, I used to have like two beavers and they're fighting, and then it's like they made peace. Yeah.
Absolutely. That is a beautiful description. So yes, spot on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to go ahead and let you get started.
Okay.
And,
Right. All right. So first of all, a little tiny bit about Huna, and then I'm going to explain some of the symbols as well and how we're going to use them. But Huna is said to date back about 35,000 years. It was illegal to practice Huna until the late 1970s. The reason being, when the Hawaiians were colonized by the Bostonians, they didn't understand what they were doing. And so they put it into the bracket, basically, of the occult and made it illegal. So a lot of what happened with Huna, it was hidden in the dances and in the chanting, because the natives were allowed to sing and dance, but they weren't allowed to practice what they were doing. And so a lot of it is hidden. So when you see some of the traditional Hawaiian dancing, every movement is telling a story, and that's how they hold the traditional knowledge. And it's based on having a very good connection with the earth. So it works with what we call the elementals and also the elements, a bit like feng shui, where you've got your earth and you've got your fire and you've got your water and you've got your air. And it also works with the premise of what we call the Huna guides, or the avaiku. And so when I'm working with clients or doing something like this with people's permission, I will also call in the Huna guides to also help with the work. So when I'm working with clients remotely, we might do a Skype session, an online session, or a telephone session, depending on location. And then oftentimes, with the client's permission, I say, can I send the Huna guides over to assist you with this? And the guides will go over, they will assist that person. And then I just say, come back when you're finished and when I next need you. And so they're just off. A bit like we're talking about those angelic pictures today, but in the same way, I think the angels work, the avaiku work in a very similar way. Now with this, what I call the bells and whistles version, we use symbols, and a lot of Huna centers on the breath, which they call the life force energy, because one of the things they had surmised, the difference between a person who's alive and full of life and vitality and someone who is no longer of this planet is the breath. Someone who has passed away is no longer breathing. And so they then said, right, well, the breath that we have within us, it has a special life force energy. So when you draw the Huna symbols, you draw them on the breath and you deliver the symbols on the breath. What I'm going to ask for, first of all, my assumption is you're here because you're interested and you want to do this work. However, we do like permission. So if those of you who are happy to receive the energy, if you're okay just to kind of raise your hand for a second, that would be really fabulous. Brilliant. Wonderful. Good. And I always say to people when I'm working in groups, for those who would like to receive it, you just remain. Oh, somebody's put, oh, thank you, Camille and Susan. They put yes in the chat. That's wonderful. Thank you. For those who are open to receive it, you just give yourself permission. There's nothing you need to try and do. Just being open. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, Penny. That's on my teleseminars. Often there's just a great big line of yeses. So that is amazing. But you don't have to try and do anything. It's just about being open to receiving it. And also, I say to people, look, if this is not for you, and as we'd say here in the UK, not your cup of tea, you can just let it pass you by. But with regards to the symbols, we draw the symbols on the breath. We deliver the symbols on the breath. So it looks and sounds a bit like. Let's just do a couple. So you draw it on the breath and you deliver it on the breath. And so what I tend to do with the group is I will do like a Huna recipe or protocol. And I think one of the craziest situations I had with this, I'm the host and the MC. There's an event that happens every year in London called the TCCHE, the Conference for Consciousness and Human Evolution. So you have people like Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton, Dr. Joe Dispenza, Lynn McTaggart, you know, those are the regular speakers. And I was just about to go on stage one year, about 3 years ago, and we recognized there was something else going on in the building. So the creator of the event said, can you do some sort of meditation with the group? And I was just walking on stage. My foot was on the first step. And I was like, okay. So I'm now like in front of 550 people. I'm like, what am I going to do? So I thought, I'll just do some Huna. They had no idea what I was doing. So I just did probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes at that, probably 2 or 3. And then I carried on, says, you know, introduce the next speaker. Came off stage, speaker segment finished. People started coming up and going, oh my God, like, I don't know what you were doing, but when you started waving your hands about, and then they were telling me what they were feeling. And I realized they were feeling what I was doing, because I did, let's say, a fire symbol. They would have had no idea. And they said, oh, I just felt this heat when you started. And then I did like a water symbol. And they said, oh, and then after that, I felt like I was under this healing waterfall. And this went on for the whole 4 days. People were stopping me everywhere I went. Oh my goodness, what, I don't know what you were doing, but this happened. I had a migraine, I had this, I was tired, I was going to go home, and now I feel, and it was just crazy. And then I've done that for the last 2 years. So it's been 3 years now. Same thing happens every single year. And of those 550 people, they all get something different. So it's not about me saying, oh, you've got a problem with your back or your knee or your ankle or your finances or your sleep. I don't even have to get involved in that. The way I see this, I don't drink particularly. I'm like, you know, I'll toast a champagne at New Year's. But there's a brand of beer that we have here called Heineken. The strap line is, Heineken refreshes the parts other beers cannot reach. And I kind of see Huna a bit like that. It just goes off. It has almost like its own divine intelligence. And it just goes off and does what it needs to do without me having to try and orchestrate anything. It's just like, I'll be the conduit for it, but then it's going to go off. So now, while I see people are very active here. So if you wanted to type into the chat, if there's something in particular that you wanted to clear, and it doesn't have to be an essay, you might just put a word in. It might be fear, overwhelm, anxiety, stress, tiredness, and if you just want to throw some of those words in there, because it's kind of useful then to when I'm thinking about what I put together and so hurt back, okay. So when I'm thinking about what the process that we use, it'd be nice to do it also with the thing headache, okay, finance, fear, 3 physical conditions, fear, ego, pain, fear, overwhelm, okay, fabulous, joint pain. Okay, actually, that's a good point. Andrew mentioned it earlier as well, for those who were here. Have some water. If you haven't had any water for the last 10 to 15 minutes, cheers. Have some water. Stepping into life purpose, finances. Okay, great. So, here we go.
So resistance to cleaning the house. I'd rather be outside in the garden. Can I have that?
I love that. I love that. Absolutely. Yes. Oh, I love it. Neck pain, also pulled a muscle on the side on Saturday. Infection. Okay. Alrighty. lung infection. Oh, desire to dance. I've been doing my dance breaks since 1975 and prescribing them to my clients for the last 20 years. Oh, even if you're just sitting, I'm still just a fan of movement. All right, brilliant. So, and also love first. And one of the things that this does is one of the things that we're doing is I call it lighting up the neurology. So you're then kind of bringing to the fore what it is you would like to work on. So when we're doing the work, kind of keeping that in mind and just kind of asking the energy to go and do whatever it needs to do to give you some help and give you some assistance with that. Right, so here we go. Okay. And then you can just take a deep breath in and exhale. And then if you've had your eyes closed, you can now gently open your eyes.
Wow. That was just relaxing. It's very centering.
And it's a wonderful relaxer. I know some people experience it in very different ways. So some people will kind of say that they're tingling, or they feel parts of the body have been enlivened. And I always say it's a bit like the ripple effect. My logo for the last 20 years, probably, let me see if you can see that. My logo for the last 20 years has been a water drop.
Oh,
cool. And the way that I've always seen this work, all of the work and all of the modalities, is like it's a catalyst, and then it creates the ripple effect where it will go off in a number of different directions, and it will ripple out into the areas of your life that require that assistance and kind of need that energy. Somebody said their eyelids are so heavy they can't open one. Somebody says, Karen, can you explain the modality, the symbols? Is it like Reiki? Now, it's funny you should say that. I did Reiki about 22 years ago. One of the things the way I used to describe Huna when I first got started, I said it was a little bit like Reiki on steroids, in terms of it's been supercharged, because there'll be times where people will feel the energy, even if they're listening to a recording later. They might be listening to an MP3. And I know that there was one of my clients out in Australia. I've went on my e-newsletter list. If I'm putting new processes together and I'm trying things out, I look for volunteers. And I will say, look, I'm trying out this process. Who wants to volunteer? Give it a go. So I did the process. Pippa in Australia couldn't make it, but she listened to the recording a few days later and sent me a very long message and said, yes, you can share it. Feel free to tell people about it. And she wrote about her experience. And that was probably 4 or 5 years ago. Last year, I was running an online program. I think it was a Raising Your Money Vibration program. And I'm because people said, oh, what if I can't make all of the sessions? Will it still work? And I said, well, let me just share with you from one of my clients across the world. As I was reading it, I suddenly realized that Pippa was describing exactly what, because she said, oh, you started, and I felt like there was this pressure. And that's when I did the symbol. The literal translation is a thunder comes down and strikes the earth and makes the earth shake. She then said, oh, I felt, things opening up. And that's where I did the one where the light comes forth from the front of the head. And as I was reading it last year, I was like, oh my goodness, even though it was a recording where you can't eat, and even if you can see me, you've still got no idea what I'm doing. Even though she had no idea what I was doing, she described exactly, because she then says about, she's like, I felt like I could see a red triangle of fire at the point where I'd done the red triangle of fire. And all I was doing is exactly what I was doing here. She would have just heard the sounds, but she accurately wrote down exactly what had happened. So the whole thing about the Reiki, I say that Reiki is almost like a gentler version. And the symbols are very, very different to Reiki. They come from said to be some of the ancient scrolls. But and sometimes I say when I'm explaining Huna, I'll say, have you heard of Reiki? And I say, well, it works in a similar way, works with energy, works with symbols. And sometimes if people are sensitive to energy, they will actually feel the dynamics of it in the moment. So somebody said beautiful waterfall, thank you. And that's one of my avaikus is related to water. So whenever I say her, it's probably not, I mean, you know what I mean, but when I call her in, people often experience it as this wonderful healing waterfall. And that is actually the way I describe it when I'm doing a verbal version of this. Tony says, I feel like I've been on vacation. That is just wonderful. You could stand in front of a hospital to help heal COVID people in pain. Is that possible? Now, there's something really, a few years ago, one of my clients, we were just doing some regular coaching breakthrough sessions. She says, Marilyn, I feel funny to ask you, but she says, my uncle is ill. He's dying, we think. We've been told we may have to do last rites. could you send him some energy? Now, previously, when people used to ask me that, I would automatically say no. Probably for the first 10 years I was in practice, because I've been a coach and therapist now for 20 years. And then suddenly, one day I said, hold on a minute, I'm saying no all the time because I'm not going to get into, if you haven't asked me directly for something, I'm not going to intervene in your life. And I know people mean well when they're asking for healing for others. But I then said, okay, you know, a bit like you said, Cindy, you asked your guys and said, when should we do this? How should we do this? And they said to you every day, and you're like, are you sure? So I went back to the Avaiku and I said to them, I said, is it possible that I can do this, and how will we do it? And they're almost like, well, I'm glad you asked. Has this taken you long enough? And they said, well, why don't you just do it? It's permission based. Send the energy over to the recipient. The energy will speak to their higher self and say, do you want to receive this? And their higher self will either go, yes, thank you very much, or no. And if it's a no, the energy will just dissipate. And if it's a yes, they receive it. So I said, okay, I'll send some healing to your uncle. And a day or so later, I thought, oh, better do the uncle. So I sat here and I'm doing and we did a session. So she comes on and she says, Marilyn, did you do anything on Thursday? I said, what do you mean? She said, did you do the thing with, I said, oh yeah, I did actually. I did it on Thursday. She says, Marilyn, they called in the priest to give him last rites. She says, suddenly he started, because he'd been on ventilation and all this sort of thing, and the priest was coming in to do the final yada yada. She said suddenly, and he had to be turned. He couldn't move on his own. So the nurses and doctors were having to come and turn him so he didn't get bed sores, etc. She says, Marilyn, I don't know what happened on Thursday, but suddenly he started to regain his energy, started breathing on his own, and he's now sitting up. That has happened, and I can't say it was anything to do with me. I just know that the day I did that was the day that this man, where the priest was there, suddenly is sitting up. Now, one of the things I always say, look, I cannot, of course, intervene in anyone's life path and journey. So sometimes I say to people, look, I can send my energy, the intention, and if it's that person's time to go, well, let's intend that they have a smoother transition. And if they've still got more work to do, we can hold the energy and the intention that it will revitalize them in some way and give them a new lease of life. And that's always the way I say it. But it's interesting what you're saying about the COVID thing, because that could probably be and Penny says, so wonderful. At the beginning, I felt a massive tingling all over your head. Later felt the heat in several places, saw several various shapes behind closed eyes. Then towards the end, I felt the energy in the root chakra trippy. And what was interesting, when we were coming to the end, what I decided to do is almost like a little chakra cleanse. So I started at the bottom, energized that one, kind of went upwards, if you like, and then I was asking for that almost to be like a fountain that goes out the top of the crown chakra, so you all get bathed in your own energy, because it's not me. You all have your own energy field and all the rest of it. So for me, I just see this like activating that, and then that will then kind of keep things moving. But yes, I'm glad you all had some lovely things happen. So Linda says, what if I don't feel anything? Is it still working? Now, the wonderful thing about this is, when I was at that event, the one with Greg and Bruce Lipton, etc., I was on the train one evening going home after the event. Guy walks up to me and he says, it's you, isn't it? I said, it depends what I've done. If it's a good thing, it's me. If it's not, it's my twin sister. And he said, I was at the conference, you were the MC, and you did that thing where you waved your hands about. I went, yeah. And he went, you came on stage. When you started, he rolled his eyes and thought, this is not what I've paid for. So he just sat there like, whatever. That day, he said, I've been silly enough to move house before I came. So that morning he was moving furniture and boxes. He put his back out. He said, I wasn't interested in what you're doing. I had no idea what you're doing, but I noticed as you started, he couldn't feel what I was doing, but he was aware that his back had started to free up. And by the end of my couple of minutes, he felt absolutely fine. And there were people there who said, I have no idea what you're doing. You're just making these noises. But then they noticed in the day that suddenly they realized that whatever the problem was either gone or started to shift itself. So it's not about, can you feel anything? we're back to that ripple effect again. It will just work for people in very unusual ways. And I always say to my breakthrough coaching clients at the end of a session, I just say, notice what you notice. And what I mean by that is notice over the coming hours, days, weeks, months, even years, because the longest I've had somebody come back and say, oh my goodness, I was meant to call you. His words were, the impact of that one-day breakthrough session are still rippling throughout my entire life. And I read his email because he'd emailed me. Somebody was looking for an executive coach and he was recommending me. And I looked and I thought, I'm pretty sure I did his one-day breakthrough session 10 years ago. So I checked my database, 10 years, it was still rippling. But at the time, I've had clients who would sit in front of me and go, well, I don't feel any different. Nothing's happened. And I just go, notice what you notice. And then they will find that they'll find themselves doing something that previously was a challenge, or suddenly if something had been consuming their mind 27 hours a day, they're only thinking about it a couple of times a day. So I would just say, be open and notice what you notice, because it does work in very interesting ways.
Well, it's funny because I said I just feel so relaxed. When we started the call, I started getting goosebumps all over and felt your energy. So that was immediate. And so I realized that it just intensified and then relaxed when you started. It's like I had this big, almost like an energy shock, and then it just started relaxing my whole body. So, but that started from the very beginning of our call. In fact, it started when I looked at your picture the first time and I said, I want to know her, because I could just feel your energy even from your photograph. So
Cindy, this will make you laugh. The program that I ran last year, before I even launched it, I'm like, I think, okay, I'm going to do it. So I sat and I Huna'd the program. I know it's going to sound crazy because all it was a mind map and an Eventbrite page. So I Huna'd the program, didn't really give it much thought. I launched it. Somebody booked, sent me an email saying, hey, Marilyn, did you do something to the program before we started? I said, what do you mean? He says, well, I've just had a deal come in that could be worth 6 figures. And it happened just after I signed up for the Raising Your Money Vibration program. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Somebody else then emailed me the next day saying, hey, Marilyn, did you do something to the program? No, she said, have you started working before we've started? Because the program it just launched. There were no sessions booked or anything like that. I hadn't done anything. And she said, because a stream of income that had dried up has suddenly come back to life. And it happened after I signed up for the program. I was like, oh, that's really great. Now I've got a 3 times convincer. I then get an email from someone who's very specific. She says, Marilyn, I made a decision last night. I was going to sign up in the morning. So got up first thing, I signed up for the program. And then she said, did you Huna the program? Because I've just been offered a much better job for a lot more money. And at that point, after 3 people, one was in Canada, one I think is somewhere probably 3 or 4 hours from me, and one is in London. They don't know each other. And that's a point. I then said, you know what? I felt a bit sick. You know, when you sort of go, really, Marilyn, come on. I said to them, I Huna'd the program before we started. And my intention was it would begin the moment you decided to sign up. And the energy, and I can't, seriously, I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. But first person, that's interesting. Second person, that's great. Third person, I'm now going to sit up and take notice. And it's like, oh, but it's when people book a session, things will happen. Even if they're booking it a week or 2 in advance, things will happen the minute they make that decision. And clients will say, or if they've heard my voice before, they'll say, oh, I actually heard that, or they'll be doing something. They'll say, I heard you say this to me. I haven't even worked with them yet. It's really, and I've had clients on teleseminars. One of them, she got up off of her chair. She says, Marilyn, I stood up to see if you were behind my sofa because you were describing my scenario, where I was, and it felt like you were in the room. So there is something very interesting that happens with this energy, and it does, yeah, it's crazy. I love it.
I love it too. And I don't know if you did something beforehand or not, but I definitely felt it from the very beginning when, you know, you had me at hello. So that was really wonderful. I want to hear from everybody else. Anybody want to say anything? I see Linda's hand is up. It's been up for a little while. Linda, do you want to unmute yourself?
No, I'm sorry. That was for when she said, "Do you want the treatment?"
Oh,
That's
okay.
why, and she said, "Raise your hand." So no,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay. All righty. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
I don't know if Mary wants to come on and say her comment, or should I read it for Mary? She just says, I felt very sleepy and now I'm suddenly wide awake.
Mary, do you want to say anything?
Hi, Marilyn. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Well, I was just felt like I was just pulled in to this really, I felt like, oh, wow, I can just go out right now. And I thought I'd take a nap. And then all of a sudden it just something started to just kind of open wider and wider. And then it just like, when you said you can open your eyes, I felt like I'm wide awake now. And it's just, that was very interesting. And now I'm kind of like, my hands kind of itch, not itch, but they're just kind of moving. And it was very powerful.
It's interesting you said that, Mary, because that's something that started, was the itching of the hands. Back of the hands?
Yep.
I don't know if you saw me doing this.
I did.
I was trying to hold my hands down because I had the same thing, but it was not, I wasn't thinking about it. But I remember, oh yeah, that's right, I started doing my hands too.
I wasn't either. And then all of a sudden I was doing this and it was like, well, that's interesting. So thank you. That was very, very powerful. And well, just thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for taking part and thank you for sharing your experience as well. And that's one of the things that happens. People will say, and the other people go, oh my goodness, I had that too, but they're not really thinking, or they think, oh, it's just me. Or like sometimes people will say they feel a temperature change, but they'll go, oh, it's maybe because the window's open or what. And then somebody else will say it and they're like, oh, no, it's got nothing to do with that because I'm wearing a jumper and I'm wearing this and I'm wearing that. So it's always really interesting. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Well, this is so great. I have loved this so much, Marilyn, and I'm looking forward to sending this to my business partner to listen to, because as I said, he's been sick for 3 weeks. They say it is not the coronavirus. However, I'm back and forth about believing whether or not it is. They found that there's a lot of different symptoms. But he tested negative a couple of weeks ago, but a lot of false negatives, a lot of false positives. So at this point, you just don't know what it is. So I would love to send this to Ferris.
And one of the things also, Huna centers on something called the breath, and they have something called ha breathing. And you breathe in through the nose and you breathe out through the mouth and make a ha sound. And what's interesting about that, of course, it's all centered around the lungs. And it's also a really great way to relax. I say to people, if you just did 30 to 60 seconds of ha breathing. So when you're breathing in, a bit like the way babies breathe, right? Because sometimes when you say to people, take a deep breath, they'll go, and then they, suck themselves in. So you're compressing the lungs. So you're breathing in and letting the kind of stomach just naturally come out. So you breathe in, but when you breathe out, you make a ha sound. And what that does is it's a wonderful way of not just clearing the lungs and getting the old sediment out of the bottom, but the kahunas use it to energize the entire body. And so I say to people, that's a really nice practice to do, just give it, if you just need a break state, if you feel that you're getting overwhelmed, just stop for a moment and just and just 30 to 60 seconds of ha breathing will then start to just what I call wake up the neurology and just get a different kind of energy. And the kahunas call it your mana, your own energy field. And what you're doing is building up your own mana, building up your own energy field. And so that can be a nice one for people to do just for themselves as well. And it's a great relaxer also.
Wonderful. And then we have Linda said, me say, so when you got the first treatment, when you volunteered, let me see, how did he do it?
This is the bells and whistles version of, because it'd be a bit dull if I had you all on a call for 20 minutes and I'm just going. So we do the version where you can actually see and hear something, but there's a version of Huna It. When I'm doing a coaching session with someone, if I get that they could benefit from some Huna, we're still doing a regular coaching session, but I will also be using the symbols while I'm just talking and listening. So while I'm talking to you, I could still be doing a Huna energy transmission. It's just a silent version. So my clients will often get in and go, oh, Marilyn, are we going to do any Huna today? And I go, we'll do that next time. Whereas, you know, we've already done that. But what they mean is they haven't seen me do anything. So what he did was almost like the energetic transmission of that, where you know, you're thinking about and energetically doing the same work, but just without drawing the symbols and without making the sounds. It's just like a silent transmission version. So, you know, when I'm speaking at conferences and events, etc., and actually, it's so interesting you say that, because I'm so set now. When I'm speaking at an event, I set the room. So before I arrive, I could be in the hotel, for example, and I will put the Hunas into the room, and the proviso is still the same. If people want to bask in the energy, they can. If they don't, let it pass them by. And I think it was when I was at the conference last year, somebody came up to me at breakfast and he said, what were you doing at 7:15 this morning? I went, I'm sorry. He said, I saw you in the room doing Huna. And I laughed, and he said, of course I didn't energize. He said, and I said, you know what? That's so funny. I woke up at 7, I'd snooze for 10 minutes, and then around 7:15, I set the energy of the room. So it means that when I walk in and when attendees walk in, the energy is set. And I do that on autopilot. So I'm laughing now, thinking, I wonder if they went and set the energy of the room like they regularly do before I arrive, because that's just what I've been doing for the last 15 years. So it's quite interesting, but it's just an energetic transmission. And Susan, it's Huna, that's the one in terms of the spelling.
Okay, great. Well, this has been so amazing. I thank you so much for coming and being with our Soul Gang. And I would love to have you come back again. Everyone, if you will email me and let me know the ripple effect. I know that somebody here said, I look forward to the ripple effect. And I am looking forward to the ripple effect. I will let you know if my house gets clean today. I've been wanting to do other things, and you know, the procrastination of the house stuff, that's not that fun, but I really like to get that done. That's where my procrastination is. So I'll let you know the ripple effect there.
Wonderful, wonderful. Mary says that was the fastest hour.
It was. I can't believe it's already a little after the hour, so I won't keep you. I thank you so much for being here. And Andrew, thank you so much for introducing me to my sister across the way.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you to everyone who took part. Thank you for your wonderful comments, the feedback, the waving. It's just been amazing. So what a lovely group you have gathered together. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And it will be sent out to the rest of our community, which we've got a pretty big community. So we will be sending this out to everyone. I'm sure you're going to be hearing from people. Would you give them your information so they know how to find you?
Oh yeah, so easiest way to get hold of me, I'm on social media, but I'll give you my email and the website. The website is, I'll say it and I'll spell it, it's transformationstm.com, and it's TRANCE, as in hypnotic trance, and F for Freddy, FORMATIONS.com, so transformationstm as in trademark.com. My email is Marilyn, MARILYN, @transformationstm.com. And on social media, it's / Marilyn Devonish, and that's DEV for Victor, ONISH. But Transformations is the main website. I warn you now, it's an informational site that is sprawling, but that's the easiest way to get hold of me. And I have an e-newsletter list if people want to sign up for that. And it's top left corner on the website. And that's where if I'm introducing new things or doing free sessions, etc., I tend to put them in the e-newsletter. Andrew is one of my regulars who always shows up for my things and is always willing to test things out. But yeah, that's how people can get hold of me. So it's just been such a fantastic fantastic event. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you
Thanks,
all
Jill.
for being here, all of you on Facebook. And if this is YouTube later, please go ahead and like our channel and follow us. Just ring that little bell. And when you do, an angel gets his wings. And everybody unmute yourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Wonderful,
you're most
wonderful.
welcome.